everyone, I'm Christi Malthouse. Welcome back to Be Ready, where we talk mental health and wellbeing, challenging times and tips and advice for all of us. Today, our guest is former NRL Brisbane Broncos and South Sydney Rabbitohs coach Anthony Seibold, who is now working in a consultancy role with the Newcastle Knights. Anthony, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us today. If ever there's a profession where mental health and physical wellbeing is of utmost importance, it's professional sport. What does wellness mean to you?
Yeah, thanks for having us, Christi. It's a pleasure to talk to you. With regards to what wellness means to me, it's, I suppose, it's making sure that physically, and I suppose more importantly, in my opinion, mentally, you have some things in place with regards to feeling good about yourself, feeling good in your profession, feeling good in your relationships, and how you do that. There's some things that I use. There's some things that I've seen that athletes use, but yeah, it's you as a whole person. Yeah,
absolutely. And has that changed for you then over the years? Do you think going from player to coach and to father and everything else?
Oh, definitely changed. I mean, think back to when I was a player, and I used to focus on the physical aspects, so I used to be pretty good in the gym. I used to be pretty good on the field with regards to, conditioning and aerobic capacity and so on. And I was a bit of a journeyman as a player, but I think back, if I had to focus more on the mental side of things, I think I would have got a lot more out of my career. I was fortunate to play NRL and also over in the Super League, but I think I focus on the technical, tactical, physical side of things, but the area that I didn't focus on was my mental health, and not only mental health, but strategies in and around whether it was mindfulness or focus. I think that's something that we didn't focus on back in the 90s when I played. We did, I think that's been the biggest thing to come into sport. And I still think it's the biggest area that's got the most growth in sport in particular. And actually, not even just in sport, in everyday life. People who work in the corporate industry, or even people who do manual work. You know what I mean? Like at some stage, if whether it's physical or mental stresses add up, you need to sort of have that, I suppose, recognition that, I'm a little bit stressed physically or mentally at the moment. Being aware of your feelings, being aware of your thoughts. We don't often spend a lot on mental health, and I think something like Readiness and just having that sort of awareness is key.
What would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I think as a coach, actually having blocks in your training program where you have an above the head space, so we put in gym programs on our training schedules. We put in field sessions in our training schedules. We put in recovery, whether it's ice baths or pool or whatever else in our programs. I think the next step is to actually have windows within the training week where this is a focus for mindfulness, or this is a focus for mental health, or this is a focus for mental skills, with regards to thinking about your role and so on. So I actually think the next step is putting blocks in the program during the week where there's a real focus on that mental space.
Absolutely. And also it's creating an environment where it's okay to not be okay. There's an accepting environment. They're not afraid to come forward and talk about that rather than trying to hide behind it and push through it, as you said.
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest area of growth. I think back to when I left my hometown as a 17-year-old. I went to Brisbane and I played lower grades of the Broncos. I was studying at university at the time, and there was a lot of challenges over my first 3 or 4 years in Brisbane, but we had no one to talk to. There were some days there that you didn't feel so great about yourself, whether you weren't performing as an athlete, or university was getting pretty challenging. But we had no one to talk to, and it was not okay to say that you were not okay.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. I think athletes, certainly within the sports that I've had some associations with, athletes understand now it's okay to say you're not okay. And I think we've got we've had enormous growth in that over the last 5 years, but I still think we've got a way to go.
Yeah. I mean, you would know, as you've just mentioned there, you've been through some really challenging times. I mean, you were named Coach of the Year with the Rabbitohs in 2018. You made the finals in your first season at the Broncos. Then when the losses mounted last year, things got really tough, didn't they? And I honestly don't think people realise how bad it does get for the person and their family who are involved in it, even just from mainstream media and pressure from the club and from supporters. I mean, what was it like for you and your family last year?
Probably saying it was challenging is underselling it quite a bit. I think it was magnified too, Christi, because of COVID. And so last year was really strange because we were in a bubble. You'd go to work and then you'd come home, and it was really hard to get away from your job. And so your identity in some ways was attached to your job. And when you're not going so well with your job, you don't feel so great about yourself. So we were losing games. As you said, I had some real success, I suppose, at South. And even I thought our first year at the Broncos, we did a hell of a job to make the playoffs that year with a really young squad. So it was a really different experience. It was challenging. It was hard on my wife because she could see how tough I was doing it. It was hard on my kids. My oldest daughter was still in Sydney, living with some family friends. So it was tough on her. She was trying to do year 12. It was tough on my younger girls because they were going to school. And in Brisbane, Broncos are probably the most supported sporting club in that part of the world. So, it was magnified a lot. And it was really hard. There were some days there I thought, is this all worth it? It really did. And, ultimately I made a decision to resign, and it was about performances. But I could cop the criticism with regards to performance, but what was really hard to deal with was the personal attacks. And then obviously I copped, a lot of defamatory comments on social media. So it was really hard. It was really challenging.
Talk to us about what happened with social media, because there was a lot of trolling and bullying that began. Can you talk us through that? Because it's horrendous.
Yeah, so I wasn't actually on social media. It's really difficult for me to talk about without getting emotional, but there was a lot of, rumours and innuendo on social media, and I didn't know that it was going around, and no one had the guts to tell me. That's the thing that hurts the most. From my understanding, there were some rumours that had been going around for 2 or 3 weeks, and nobody at the club, nobody, outside our club had the decency or had the guts or the courage to ring me up and say, look, there's rumours going around. I remember one of the players ringing me on a Sunday and saying, look, there's a person who's telling the media all these different stories. And then I had a friend who's one of the dads that my daughter goes to school with, who rang me and said, look, I'm getting sent all these messages on WhatsApp. But it was debilitating. And it had a significant impact on my wife. It had a significant impact on my daughters, particularly my 2 teenagers, because they are on social media. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't actually believe how willing people were to share those rumours. So the amount of comments, the amount of forwarding on of WhatsApp messages, of Facebook messages, of Instagram messages, really blew me away. And it was hard. It was hard. At my darkest time, I wanted it all to go away. And I thought, me potentially not being here may take some of the load off my wife and kids. It was debilitating. It was devastating. It had a significant impact on my wife. It had a significant impact on my kids. My 2 oldest girls are teenagers, so they're on social media. So people were sending them the messages and saying, is this true about your dad? Or, being derogatory about me to my daughters. There was a rumour about my daughter trying to kill herself, which is totally untrue. So it was really difficult to handle. And as I said, I had some really dark days. There's 2 people who I didn't know that particularly well who reached out to me. One was Phil Gould, who's an ex-coach who was very successful coach. He's a commentator now on Channel 9. He rang me one day and he spoke to me. All I wanted to do, Christi, was hide away because I was embarrassed about losing. I was embarrassed about the mainstream media commentary about me. They painted me out to be somebody I'm not. And then obviously the derogatory and defamatory rumours on social media, I just wanted to lie in bed. I didn't want to get out. And Gus rang me one day and he said, don't you dare hide behind the curtains, your family needs you. And then the other person, and so I really resonated with that. I resonated with what Gus said. And then the next person was Aaron Molan, Aaron, I've been interviewed by Aaron a couple of times on TV, but Aaron had been defamed, had been trolled on social media previously, and I didn't realise how tough it was for her. But she reached out to me out of the blue and said, "We've got to make a change." And I thought, you know what, out of a really tough and challenging situation, I thought, you know what, I've got to turn this into a positive. And we worked really hard to try and get some legislation change. Paul Fletcher, the Minister for Communications, Julie Inman Grant, the Security Commissioner, they've been fantastic with their support. Aaron went and spoke to the Prime Minister, and there's going to be some legislation change, and opportunity to troll others behind a fake name is no longer going to be there going forward. And it's not about being soft on the criticism, it's about making some change. I would hate to see what happened to me, others have to endure, and I know others have had to endure, and there's been people who've committed suicide off the back of trolling and so on. So again, out of a really crappy situation, I can say that we needed to make some change, and I could either hide behind the curtains or I could go out there. And I knew that by putting my head up and talking on 60 Minutes, I knew that it's hard for me to even talk about this, but I was encouraged by the police to go down the criminal route, even though they said, look, we're not going to be able to charge these people, but what we need to do is we need to show that legislation's weak. And so by you being defamed and harassed on social media, if we go down this route and then we can show that we can't actually make charges to somebody, and I was even criticised in mainstream media for going down that route, but I was encouraged by the police to do that. So there would be legislation change. It wasn't about me being a flower or about me being soft. People within the Queensland Police and New South Wales Police said, we need you to stand up. If I didn't stand up, like who's gonna? You know what I mean? Like, do we wait for the next person to be consumed and be defamed?
I mean, these new legislation rules that are announced recently, I mean, they're huge, aren't they?
They are huge, Christi. I mean, we will have the strongest regulations in and around social media in the world once these new laws are passed. What the new laws mean is, those anonymous trolls hiding, or cowards, as you said, hiding behind anonymous platforms. The e-security now, the e-security commissioner now has, or will have, laws in place to be able to contact that platform, that social media platform, and say, give us the identity of this person, this person, this person, or these accounts. You know what, going forward, I think there's got to be some accountability around social media platforms. This legislation will allow for accountability, but also if you want to go and defame someone, you can be fined up to $100,000.
So what are you doing these days? Because it sounds like you've learned a lot about yourself and about your mental health. So what are you doing these days for your own, overall well-being and mental health?
Yeah, so there's a couple of strategies that I've learned. One is I do a lot of breathing, some Wim Hof breathing. So it's just 5 minutes a day where, I take time for that process. So he's taught me a little bit about that. Actually being present. So I feel as I'm a lot more present and in the moment. And that's taken real focus to be able to do that. So I make sure that there's a time in the day where, whether it's through listening to a meditation app or just actually being present and taking a couple of minutes to focus on the moment. When I have negative self-talk, you're the biggest critic of yourself. So just recognising that and then trying to dump those thoughts or feelings. So there's some processes I've got in place. So, I feel like I'm in a really good, I'm in a really good space. I've got some diverse interests, which is good as well, because I've focused on footy for the last 15 years. I'd hate to go through what I went through again. But you know what? I reckon out of a really crappy situation, I'm a better person for it. And I feel like I've got better strategies in place. I used to have my identity attached to me being the coach and my ups and downs with the wins and losses. It's not, you know what I mean? My identity is as a husband, as a parent, as a person. So I just feel better for actually investing some time in this space. And some people probably think, I'm talking rubbish, but look, I feel really good at the moment, and I feel opportunities that Readiness to provide and so on for young people, for people in all walks of life outstanding tools to develop and to use.
So thank you so much for sharing
Pleasure.
all of your experiences with us and chatting to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Christi. No, my pleasure. And as I said, I think having the opportunity to talk and share my story is a positive thing. If it can help one or two other people, then you know what, it's worth sort of putting my head up again and sharing the story.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that very fascinating chat. Make sure to tune in to the next episode of Be Ready.